The first time the door handle moved, I was standing in my kitchen looking at the microwave clock. It was little after 11:30 p.m., and I remember that because I had work the next morning and was already annoyed at myself for still being awake. I lived alone in a small rental house, quiet enough at night that even small sounds stood out. The front door was directly across from the kitchen, and I could see it clearly. The handle slowly pressed down, held for a second, then came back up. I didn't move. I just stared at it, trying to convince myself I imagined it. Old house, loose latch, something like that. Then it moved again, this time a little quicker. Down, hold, up. It didn't feel random. It felt like someone testing the door. I set the plate I was holding into the sink without taking my eyes off it. My hands were wet and cold, and I wiped them on my shirt without really thinking. The porch light outside had been out for a few days, so the glass panel next to the door just showed darkness. I grabbed my phone but didn't call anyone yet. I kept waiting to hear footsteps, a voice, anything normal. I didn't hear a thing. Then I heard the keyhole scrape, not a key turning, just something metallic brushing against it like someone was trying to find the opening. That was when it stopped feeling explainable. I backed up into the kitchen, phone in my hand, trying to unlock it. My thumb slipped twice. The handle moved again, harder this time, and the door gave a short, heavy thud against the frame. I felt it in my stomach more than I heard it. I dialed 911 and kept my voice low. While I was talking, I moved toward the hallway so I wouldn't be directly visible if the door opened. The dispatcher asked if I saw anyone. I said no. Asked if the door was locked. I said yes. She told me to stay on the line. Then everything went quiet. That silence was worse than the noise. I could hear my own breathing, the fridge humming, nothing else. Then there was a knock, just one. A few seconds later, another. I told the dispatcher, and she said officers were on the way. It didn't feel fast enough. Then the handle moved again, slower this time, and right after that I heard a voice, low, muffled through a door. I couldn't make out the words, but it was calm. That made it worse. I asked if I should say something, tell them police were coming. She told me to stay quiet. So I stood there, listening, knowing someone was right outside and possibly listening for me too. After a few seconds, I heard footsteps move away from the porch. For a moment, I thought they left. Then I heard the same steps again, but from the side of the house. That's when I realized they weren't leaving. They were checking the rest of the house. I moved into my bedroom, the only room with thick curtains, and crouched beside the bed. A few seconds later, I heard a light tapping on the living room window, not knocking, just a slow, deliberate tap. I covered my mouth without thinking. The dispatcher kept talking, but I barely heard her. All I could think was that the lights inside probably made it obvious I was home. Then the tapping stopped. A pause. And then a scrape along the wall, close enough that I knew they had come around the side. I kept staring at my bedroom door, waiting to hear the back handle next. I never did. Instead, I heard someone shout outside, loud and sharp, and then fast movement across the gravel. The dispatcher said officers were there. I stayed where I was until one of them knocked and identified themselves. When I opened the door, they asked if I saw which way the man went. So they had seen someone. They checked around the house, but didn't find him. One of them, pointed out marks near the lock and smudges on the window like someone had been pressing their hands against a glass. He asked if I knew who it could be. I said no. I didn't stay there the next night. What still bothers me isn't just the handle or the voice. It's how careful it all was. Like he wasn't trying to break in fast. He was trying to find out exactly how alone I really was. The first time I noticed something was wrong with the basement door, I was halfway down the hallway carrying a basket of laundry and had to stop because it was open. I always kept that door closed. Not locked all the time, but definitely shut. It led straight down into a concrete basement that I barely used except for storage, and I had this habit of closing it just so the house felt contained. Seeing it slightly open, maybe a few inches, felt off immediately. I stood there for a second, just looking at the gap, trying to remember if I had gone down there earlier. I told myself I probably had. Maybe I grabbed something and forgot to close it all the way. It didn't feel convincing, but it was enough to get me moving again. I set the laundry down and walked over, pushing the door shut with my foot. It closed with that same heavy click it always made, nothing unusual. I didn't think much of it after that. Later that evening, I was sitting on the couch with the TV on low, just letting it run in the background while I scrolled on my phone. It was quiet enough that I could hear the house settling, the usual creaks, nothing that stood out. At some point, I heard a faint sound from the hallway, not loud, just a dull shift, like something moving slightly out of place. I muted the TV and listened. For a few seconds, nothing. Then I heard it again, a soft, dragging kind of noise. I got up and walked into the hallway, already feeling that tightness in my chest you get when something doesn't line up. The basement door was open again, wider this time, maybe halfway. I stopped a few steps away from it and just stared down into the dark space below. The light down there was off, and the stairs dropped straight into shadow. I told myself it was just the latch not catching properly. Maybe the frame was uneven. Maybe the door just didn't stay shut like I thought it did. I reached out and pushed it closed again, a little harder this time, making sure it latched. I even gave it a small tug to check. It held. That should have been enough to settle it, but it wasn't. I didn't go back to the couch right away. I stayed there for a minute, listening. The house was quiet again. Eventually, I went back, turned the TV volume up slightly, and tried to ignore it. Maybe 10 minutes passed. Then I heard something else. This time, it was clearer. A slow, uneven sound from below the floor, not the door, from inside the basement. I muted the TV again and sat there, completely still. The sound came again, a step, then another, not loud, but distinct enough that I couldn't explain it away as pipes or settling. It sounded like someone moving carefully, like they didn't want to be heard. I stood up slowly, not really deciding to, just reacting. Every part of me wanted to stay where I was, but the idea of something being under me without knowing what it was felt worse. I walked back into the hallway, stopping again a few feet from the door. It was still closed. That almost made it worse, because whatever I heard was definitely on the other side of it. I reached for the handle, then stopped. My hand hovered there for a second, and I realized I was waiting to hear something again before touching it, like I needed confirmation. And then I got it. A soft movement from directly behind the door. Close. Too close to be anywhere but right at the bottom of the stairs. I pulled my hand back immediately. I didn't open it. I stepped back instead, my eyes fixed on the handle, waiting for it to move. It didn't. Everything went quiet again. I stood there for a few seconds trying to decide what to do. Open it and see, or leave it closed and pretend I didn't hear anything. Neither option felt right. That's when I realized something that made the whole situation worse. If someone was actually down there, closing the door wasn't keeping them out. It was keeping them in. And I was the only one in the house with them. I backed away from the door slowly and grabbed my phone from the counter. My first thought was to leave, just walk out and call someone from outside. But that meant turning my back on the hallway, on the door, on whatever might be behind it. I didn't like that idea either. I stood there for a few seconds longer, listening, waiting for another sound. Nothing. Then, without warning, there was a sudden, sharp thump from the other side of the door. Not loud enough to break anything, but strong enough to make the door shift in its frame. I jumped back without thinking. My heart was racing so fast it felt like it was in my throat. I didn't wait after that. I grabbed my keys and moved straight for the front door, keeping my eyes on the hallway as I passed it. I didn't hear anything else behind me, but that didn't make it better. It just meant whatever was down there had stopped moving again. I got outside, shut the door, and only then did I feel like I could actually breathe. I called the police from the driveway. When they came, they checked the basement. They didn't find anyone. They told me the door latch might be faulty, that older houses do things like that. I nodded like that made sense, but I didn't tell them about the footsteps or the movement right behind the door, because I already knew what they'd say. And honestly, I'm not sure I wanted them to go back down there looking for something they couldn't explain either. The first time I noticed it, I was in the kitchen talking out loud to myself, which I do sometimes when I'm alone. It was late, maybe around 10:45 p.m., and I had just gotten home, still in my jacket, keys on the counter, lights on in most of the house. I remember saying something like, "I need to stop eating this late," just kind of thinking out loud while I opened the fridge. And the second I finished the sentence, everything went completely quiet. Not normal quiet, the kind where it feels like something stopped because of you. I froze for a second, listening. Before I had spoken, there had been a faint sound somewhere in the house. I hadn't really paid attention to it at the time, just background noise. But now it was gone. I stood there with the fridge door open, cold air hitting my face, trying to figure out what I had just been hearing. It took me a few seconds to place it. It had sounded like slow movement, like something shifting weight on the floor. I closed the fridge and stayed still, waiting to see if it would start again. For a while, nothing happened. I told myself it was probably the house settling, or maybe something outside I misheard. That explanation felt thin, but it was enough to keep me from reacting. I walked into the living room and sat down, keeping the TV volume low so I could still hear anything else. A few minutes passed, then I heard it again, that same slow, uneven sound. Not constant, not rhythmic, just occasional movement, like someone taking a step, then waiting, then another. This time, I paid attention to where it was coming from, somewhere deeper in the house, toward the hallway that led to the bedrooms. I muted the TV and leaned forward, listening harder. The sound came again, slightly closer. I felt that tight, almost hollow feeling in my chest that you get when something isn't right, but you can't prove it yet. I stood up slowly, not wanting to make noise, and took a few steps toward the hallway. The floor creaked under my foot. The sound stopped instantly. I didn't move after that. I just stood there, halfway between the living room and the hallway, staring into the dark. I waited. Nothing. I said quietly, "Hello?" My voice sounded smaller than I expected. And again, nothing. No response. No movement. Just silence. I backed up slowly into the living room again, keeping my eyes on the hallway. My phone was on the coffee table, and I picked it up, not calling anyone yet, just holding it. I tried to think of something normal. Maybe a pipe. Maybe something shifted. Maybe I was just tired. I sat back down, but I didn't relax. I stayed listening. A minute passed, then two. Then I heard it again, this time definitely closer. From the hallway entrance itself, a small movement, like a foot adjusting position. I felt my grip tighten on my phone. I didn't get up this time. I stayed exactly where I was and said, "Louder now. Who's there?" The moment the words left my mouth, the sound stopped again, completely, not fading out, not moving away, just gone. That was the part that didn't make sense. If it was something normal, it wouldn't react like that. It wouldn't stop the second I spoke. I realized then that whatever it was aware of me. Not just there, aware. I backed up slowly into the living room again, keeping my eyes on the hallway. My phone was on the coffee table, and I picked it up, not calling anyone yet, just holding it. I tried to think of something normal. Maybe a pipe. Maybe something shifted. Maybe I was just tired. I sat back down, but I didn't relax. I stayed listening. A minute passed, then two. Then I heard it again, this time definitely closer. From the hallway entrance itself, a small movement, like a foot adjusting position. I felt my grip tighten on my phone. I didn't get up this time. I stayed exactly where I was and said, "Louder now. Who's there?" The moment the words left my mouth, the sound stopped again, completely, not fading out, not moving away, just gone. That was the part that didn't make sense. If it was something normal, it wouldn't react like that. It wouldn't stop the second I spoke. I realized then that whatever it was aware of me. Not just there, aware. I didn't want to move toward the hallway anymore, but staying where I was felt worse. I stood up again, slowly, and took one step forward. The floor creaked. Silence. Another step. Silence. I reached the hallway entrance and stopped. It was darker there, the light from the living room barely reaching in. I couldn't see anything clearly past a certain point. I stayed there, listening, waiting. Then, from just beyond where I could see, I heard a very small movement. Not a full step, just a shift. Close. Too close to be anywhere but just around the corner. I stepped back immediately. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I didn't say anything this time. I didn't want to trigger that silence again, because now it didn't feel like coincidence. It felt like something was stopping on purpose, like it didn't want me to hear where it was. I backed into the living room, grabbed my keys, and moved toward the front door without taking my eyes off the hallway. Every step felt too loud. I expected the sound to start again behind me, closer this time, but it didn't. It stayed silent. I got to the door, unlocked it, and stepped outside as quickly as I could without slamming it. Once I was out there, I finally turned and shut it behind me. I stood on the porch for a few seconds, listening through the door. Nothing. Just the normal quiet of outside. I called the police from there. When they came, they checked the house, every room, the hallway, everything. They didn't find anyone. One of them suggested it could have been the house settling, or maybe something falling that echoed strangely. I nodded, even though I already knew that didn't explain it, because houses don't stop making noise when you speak, and they definitely don't wait until you move closer to start again.